Our first true story starts on January of 1897. Mary Jane Hester of Greenbrier, West Virginia, was grieving for her daughter Zona, who had died in mysterious circumstances earlier that month at the age of 23. The official cause of death was recorded as being complications resulting from childbirth, but Mary Jane knew that her daughter had not been pregnant. Zona had given birth to an illegitimate child 2 years earlier, but to suggest that her health had been compromised to such an extent that she could have succumbed to it as a result, Mary Jane was not satisfied. Her suspicions had been further aroused by the testimony of the attending physician, Dr. Knapp, who was also, coincidentally, the coroner. He had been summoned to Zona's home on that fateful night to find that her husband of just 3 months, Edward, had moved the body to an upstairs bedroom, and he had redressed her in her finest Sunday clothes. Edward was in a severely agitated state, cradling his new bride's lifeless body in his arms and wailing like a music hall villain. He refused to allow the doctor to examine her closely, insisting that he let her be in peace to grieve. He claimed to know nothing of the circumstances that had led to her death, as the body had been discovered by a young boy whom he had sent to the house on an errand. It was the boy who had found her lying lifeless downstairs and had run for help. All Edward would say was that she had succumbed to an everlasting fit. Under the circumstances, Dr. Knapp could do nothing more than catch a cursory glimpse of the dead woman's face, which he observed had a marked discoloration on the right cheek and on the neck consistent with a blow or strangulation. At the wake, Edward's erotic behavior aroused further suspicion. He refused to allow any of the mourners to approach the casket and had covered the marks on her neck with a scarf, which he claimed had been her favorite. It was quite by chance that her mother happened to remove a white sheet from the coffin just before the burial. Perhaps it was female intuition or a whisper from beyond the grave. Whatever compelled her to recover the sheet, it was to prove a defining moment in the case. The first thing Mary Jane noticed was the odd odor which she had initially attributed to embalming fluid, but the more familiar she became with that smell, the more convinced she became that it was something else, something indefilable. When she tried to rinse the sheet, the water turned the color of blood. Scooping some of it out with a jug, she was astonished to see it was clear as drinking water, yet the water in the bowl remained crimson red. The sheet was no longer white but pink, the color of diluted blood. No matter how hard she scrubbed the sheet and no matter how long she soaked it, the stubborn stain would not come out. The only thing Mary Jane could do now was pray, and she demanded answers, for if denied, she knew she would lose her mind from grief. In the following days, when the dying light of day had receded and the shadows lengthened, her prayers were answered. On 4 successive nights, Zona's earthbound spirit manifested in her mother's house and revealed how she had suffered at the hands of her abusive husband. On the night of January 22nd, Edward had flown into a rage when he learned that she had not cooked meat for his dinner. He beat her and he broke her neck. And to prove it, the apparition turned its head around 360 degrees. Had anyone inspected the body, they would have seen the incriminating bruises and felt the dislocated vertebrae in her neck. But as no post-mortem had been performed, there was no evidence to support the mother's suspicion other than the accusation of a ghost. Nevertheless, Mary Jane marched over to the office of the local prosecutor, John Preston, and demanded that he put the question to her former son-in-law. Preston couldn't order Edward's arrest on hearsay evidence at the best of times, and certainly not on the allegations provided by a ghost, but he had his doubts concerning Edward's version of the events and was only too willing to have Zona's body exhumed for an autopsy. The autopsy confirmed that the real cause of death was strangulation, which was all the prosecutor needed to instigate proceedings. Edward was immediately arrested, and while he paced up and down his tiny cell, further investigations uncovered his erratic past life. Proof was obtained of 2 earlier marriages, one of which ended in divorce and the other with the accidental death of the second wife who had been killed by a blow to the head. Apparently, 3 wives were not enough for Edward, who boasted to his fellow inmates that he intended to chalk up to 7 marriage partners before he started to settle down. He was confident that no jury would convict him. After all, what evidence could they have? No one had actually seen him murder his wife. An intruder could have done it. All he needed to do was sow sufficient reasonable doubt, and he'd walk out of the courtroom a free man. He had heard the rumors of Zona's ghost, but dismissed it out of the hand of this ravenous, grief-stricken mother. Unfortunately for the prosecution, testimony pertaining to the ghost was ruled inadmissible by the judge even before the trial got underway. When Edward walked into the courtroom on the first day of the trial, it was all he could do to suppress his smudge grin. Edward's attorney thought he would have some fun at Mary Jane's expense by asking her to repeat her ghost story in the belief that it would discredit her in the eyes of the jury, but she remained calm throughout the questioning, impressing both the jury and the judge. Nothing the defense could say seemed to sway her away. It was not her imagination. She assured the court her daughter had told her she had been killed by having her breath choked out of her and her neck squeezed off at the first vertebrae. That was the first time that the precise cause of death had been mentioned during the proceedings, and it was when it was confirmed by the physician who had written the autopsy report. There was a hushed silence in the courtroom. Edward was caught in a web of deceit and convicted of murder. The only reason he escaped execution was the fact that he had been convicted on circumstantial evidence and not the word of an eyewitness. He died in prison on March 13 of 1900 and is the only man to have been convicted of murder in the United States on the testimony of a ghost.